Hi guys, before we get into it, a very quick disclaimer that you'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist, and there will be spoilers today for Demons of the Mind, so do keep that in mind. I got a little bit of a surprise when I put this on the other night because I'd been expecting another contemporary film. It seems that so many of Hammer's films as they got towards the mid-70s were set in modern times, things like Straight On Till Morning and Fear in the Night, and even some of the later Dracula films. So I kind of just assumed that this one would follow suit, but no, it begins with a horse and carriage going through some woodlands to signal that we are back in Gothic times. And I was very pleased about this because there's something quite comforting about a Hammer film beginning with horses clip-clopping through some woods. I wonder how many Hammer films have featured a horse and carriage going through some woods. It must be a lot, but there's something about that sight that just puts me in a good mood for the film to come. This was directed by Peter Sykes. He would go on to do To the Devil a Daughter, which is going to be my next and final Hammer film that I cover. He also did a TV show called Emmerdale, 9 years before Emmerdale actually started, which is weird. That there must have been another Emmerdale, I presume. He also did The Avengers in the late 60s, some episodes on that. So this is a story about a wealthy family who live in this massive mansion, but the father keeps his two children locked in their bedrooms. They're young adults, these children. And the reason he does this is because the mother committed suicide. She had some kind of mental illness and killed herself in front of her kids. And the father is worried that the two kids will have the same disease. So he's keeping them locked up. He's giving them treatments like draining blood from them, weird stuff. Helping him with this is the aunt of the family, who's also the maid and some kind of bold butler figure. But we're not sure throughout this movie whether the father's just being a tyrant with this behaviour and abusing his kids, or whether the kids might actually be mad. You know, the film sits on the fence about that for the longest time. Whilst all this is going on, there's also a village nearby where some women keep disappearing from time to time and getting murdered. So the villagers' backs are up and they don't know what's going on. We follow both situations, and eventually the two plot threads will merge towards the end of the film. In terms of actors, so we've got Shane Bryant playing one of the children at the mansion. He was in loads of Hammer films around about this time. We've also got Patrick Magee. I believe he was in The Avengers. I say that because I've never seen it, but I think he was in that show. So that would be a connection with the director. And we've also got Robert Brown, who I remember from the Bond films. I didn't recognise any of the women in this, as nice as they are to look at. I'm guessing Hammer found some new glamorous types to put in this one. But it's a good cast on the whole, and I think that just about sets us up. We can now start discussing just how good or bad this film is. I read a couple of comments on some of my previous videos saying that this film was kind of near, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than that. I like how the key mysteries are preserved, not just until the end of the film, but actually beyond it, because I don't think you ever get a clear answer with this as to whether the father was the root of all the evil or whether it's actually the kids. You know, I think both possibilities come to pass, really. Yes, the father has clearly dealt with this situation very, very wrong, but also there's something really off with these kids as well, especially the male. In terms of the suggested incest, yes, there are strong hints that the brother and the sister had some kind of physical relationship, but it's never confirmed either. It's something else that's just left for you to interpret, and I like it when films do this. Even the murders are unresolved, really. Well, one of them was clearly done by the kid at the mansion, but there's at least one other murder that couldn't have been done by him, because I figure he must have been locked up in his room at the time. So lots of things that are just never clearly defined and explained in this film. But I like it when films do that. If you get a film like Crescendo, you'll get the big reveal 5 or 10 minutes from the end, and then there's nothing left to think about. And the reveal itself might actually be a little bit underwhelming. There's definitely a folk horror type vibe to the village side of this story. There's like a ritual they do at one point involving like a straw doll thing. And I think the purpose of all this is to ward off what they perceive to be the evil demons in the forest that are killing their own. But if you look back on this film with hindsight, I think this ceremony actually works, because it's not long after this that the villagers get an accidental sign that it's the wealthy landowner who is the cause of all the problems, and that is kind of true. Well, at least one of the murders, he's directly responsible, really, because of how he's treated his son. There's a massive wealth gap between the village and the landowner and his family in this. This is the same in all Hammer Gothics, but it seems especially so in this film. I mean, the size of the mansion is ridiculous. It's almost in the clouds. It looks like it's got about 25 bedrooms. It's obscene that something would be built for just one family. Whereas everybody in the village, they're all living in straw huts, that they own nothing more than a couple of chickens. The gap is absolutely huge. But it's not like the wealthy side of this film are having it all their own way. Nobody's enjoying their lives. The two kids are having a miserable time locked in their rooms, and the three characters who are not locked up, they're spending all their time worrying about the kids. So even though they're rich, they're not enjoying their trappings, where at least the villagers are having some kind of life, albeit they are fast running out of hot young blondes. Why is it that in these films it's always the blonde women who are most in danger of being killed by whatever's lurking in the woods? It was the same with Twins of Evil. Every time a blonde went out into the woods with a wicker basket, she ended up getting burned alive. In this film, every time a blonde goes into the trees, she gets strangled by whoever the killer is. But I still think that if I was in one of these films, I would prefer to be a villager rather than one of the Silver Spoon kids, because in the world of Hammer, you can literally be a guy living in a mud hut with just a couple of chickens, and you can still be married to like a really hot model who looks like she's just come off some kind of Swedish Next Top Model or something. But if you live in the big castle, then okay, you might be rich, but at the same time, you might have a son who's chained up because he's secretly a vampire. Your wife might have mental illness. You might have a daughter who's half reptile, half woman. If there's an evil in the local area, chances are it comes from your big residence. Whereas if you live in the village, then probably, yes, you'll be very poor, but you'll also be sexually satisfied probably, and just generally getting on with your life. The locations in this are really good. The mansion that they found to film in is incredibly snazzy. The interiors as well look really good. To be honest, everywhere in the film looks good. The woodlands, the village. There's this little grove area in the woods with trees with red petals that looks really nice. It's implied that the killer likes to bring his victims to this place, or possibly women are walking in the woods and they're spotting this little clump of trees with petals, and so they're going over there, so they're more likely to die in this place. Maybe it's not entirely clear, but I just like the fact that those trees that look like that are there. It's a little bit of creative spark, rather than just having all the women dying in the green trees and that's it, with no thought behind it. There's some good side characters in the movie, which is important because a lot of the main characters are a little bit dull, to be honest. The two main kids spend most of the movie looking completely stoned, a bit like Laurie in Halloween 2. The main guy, the father, he's mostly quite an irritating presence because he's constantly rattling through his dialogue in a way that's not going to give the plot away, if you see what I mean. Plus, the performance from this actor, over the top at times. It's like this guy is using this film to try out for King Lear. There's one scene where he just does this weird collapse to the ground, like, and I'm like, is he having a heart attack or something? It turns out he's just doing a really dramatic fall to the ground because he doesn't like a certain thing that's just happened. But not a great character, I'd say. But the smaller characters impress me more. Like there's a priest who's just really funny. He's so dramatic. He's one of those who's constantly like, there's evil, or we have to trust in God, you know, that kind of thing. But I just liked him no end. There's also a bald guy who works at the castle, and this guy's role is a little bit unclear. I'm not sure if he's like an uncle or an employee at the castle, but he's had some kind of fling with one of the women from the village, and I found that really strange. I just couldn't put these two characters together, really. No idea how this fling would have started, but not all the mysteries in this film are really good, well-developed mysteries, I'd say. This thing with the blonde guy and the blonde girl and the bald guy is just really strange. I think the film is using it as an excuse to eventually get this particular blonde to the castle later on, maybe. In terms of negatives for this film, it does feel very stodgy at times. Like there are scenes that feel like they're just there, so just to pad the runtime out. Like there's a moment where the two youngsters escape from their room in a really protracted sequence where the girl spends ages trying to get these keys off her aunt, and it's really high tension stuff. But then as soon as they've escaped, they get caught in the corridor again and just get thrust back into their rooms, and it's like we've just achieved nothing from the past 5 minutes. I think it would have been better if these two characters had actually escaped, gone somewhere else in the castle and talked about their feelings and whether they're planning to escape or not. And they could have sort of, we could have found out more about their characters and how they feel about everything that's going on in the movie, rather than just having the little bit of escapology and then back in their rooms and we learn nothing about them. Also, later on in the film, there's a strange set of events. So the father, he comes up with this harebrained plan to bring this blonde woman to the castle under the pretense that she's going to be in a play. What he actually wants to do is to get her in the same room as his son so that he can be attracted to her, and the idea is that he's going to focus his attentions on her rather than his sister. But it's just a bit stupid, and it assumes that the son could only ever fancy his sister, which I'm not entirely sure is correct. But the whole setup is completely bonkers. It predictably goes awfully wrong, and it leads to a murder. So there are a few things throughout the plot that are not realised very well, but I still enjoyed the film as a whole. So many cool mysteries and interesting things going on. I think it definitely helped that it's been a while since I've watched a Hammer film in this time frame. If I'd have watched this straight after, say, Twins of Evil and Lust for a Vampire, I might have enjoyed it a little bit less. But given all the modern day sort of Hammer films I've been watching recently, to get this one quite close to the end of my Hammer run, it was a nice little throwback. Before we wrap up, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I've got for this. So here is my copy of Demons of the Mind. Now, I will confess that I did go a little bit cheap on this. I bought the DVD version for about £6, but I could have had a Blu-ray version for £12, but given that I'd never seen it before, I thought to myself, well, I'll get the cheaper one this time, and if it turns out I really like it, and I can always upgrade in the future. As it happens, I did like the movie, but whether I will spend more money on it going forwards, just for the slightly crisper picture that the Blu-ray would bring, I don't know, because the film still looks pretty good on this DVD, to be honest. This version does come with a commentary track, and I did watch about an hour of that straight after the movie, but then I got too tired to finish it off. The commentary track is done by director Peter Sykes, writer Christopher Wicking, and co-star Virginia Weatherall. I forget which woman she was playing in this, but it was interesting listening to these people talk about the movie. I do like hearing old stories about how these films were made. Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror and find out how we're going to score this thing. So we got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 bloody axes out of 5. A thoroughly enjoyable movie, and I guess that just about ends that. I'll be back next time to do To the Devil a Daughter, which will be my final Hammer film that I review on the channel. What an emotional video that's going to be. So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.